Welcome to Trauma Bay.
Religion often presents itself as a set of comforting stories and guiding principles. From the earliest civilizations to the modern day, people have turned to belief systems for meaning, for a sense of belonging, and for answers to life's toughest questions. But when a belief becomes so deeply ingrained that it resists all evidence, resists all logic, and persists even when it causes harm, there's a question worth asking. Could the structure of religious belief share features with certain mental disorders? Many patterns of human behavior can overlap with clinical categories without necessarily crossing the line into pathology. Yet when faith turns into an unquestionable certainty, despite clear contradictions and real-world evidence, it starts to resemble some forms of compulsive thinking or delusional conviction. Consider the way someone with obsessive-compulsive disorder might feel compelled to perform rituals, day after day, to stave off an undefined sense of anxiety. Prayer rituals, confession, penance, and other repetitive religious practices can fill an almost identical role. In both cases, the individual seeks relief from discomfort. A 2018 study found that nearly 40% of people with OCD reported that their compulsions had religious overtones, compelling hand-washing to ward off sin, or repetitive prayer to earn forgiveness. Such overlaps don't prove that faith is a disorder, but they do suggest a structural similarity between ritualized religion and certain anxiety-driven habits. Delusions are another hallmark of serious mental illness. They involve fixed, false beliefs that persist even when confronted with contradictory evidence. Many devout believers hold convictions, for instance, that a deity intervenes in daily events, that defy any reasonable test. Studies of memory and testimony show that anecdotal reports of answered prayers often arise from natural coincidences or selective recall. Yet for someone convinced they have direct divine communication, no amount of probability math will shake their certainty. In schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders, patients might believe they are being spoken to by unseen voices. In religion, millions share a belief in receiving guidance from an invisible presence. When whole societies endorse the same narrative, it ceases to be classified as a personal psychosis, but psychologically, the experience can be remarkably similar. Then there's the phenomenon of cognitive dissonance, holding two contradictory ideas at once and resolving the tension by bending reality. A person might accept scientific evidence for evolution, yet insist their holy book must be literally true. Rather than rejecting one belief, they carve out mental exceptions. God made fossils look old. Surveys show more than half of self-identified believers hold at least one creationist view alongside acceptance of mainstream science. This mental juggling act is a coping mechanism to reduce discomfort, much like someone convincing themselves their repetitive behaviors aren't excessive because they're essential. It's not clinical diagnosis, but it reveals a mind bending itself to maintain a fixed worldview at all costs. Real-world examples illustrate how belief can become pathological. In 1997, a pastor in North Carolina convinced congregants that surviving an armed attack depended on standing firm in their pews. When bullets flew, many stayed put. Several were wounded. One child was killed. The tragedy stemmed from unshakable faith overriding basic survival instincts. Another case involved a family in Canada in 2019 who refused life-saving medical treatment for their child because God would heal her. The child died of a treatable illness. Courts labeled their actions neglectful homicide. Here, harmless belief crossed into dangerous territory, indistinguishable from a mental state that blinds people to reality. Yet religion also shares traits with positive social identity. Many faith communities offer social support, charitable outreach, and moral frameworks that discourage harmful behaviors. Evolutionary psychologists argue religion evolved as a social glue, promoting cooperation in large groups. In that sense, adaptive religious beliefs could be considered healthy, much like certain repetitive routines can be comforting without being pathological. The line emerges when belief stops being a tool and becomes an impervious worldview demanding conformity and punishing doubt. The diagnostic manuals for mental health emphasize distress and impairment. Belief in prayer or an afterlife doesn't count as illness if it doesn't impair daily functioning or cause distress. Problems arise when religious conviction leads to social isolation, refusal of medical care, or violence. In some studies of extremist cells, researchers found that fervent belief systems gave members a kind of tunnel vision. Personal identity fused so tightly with doctrine that any questioning was treated like a betrayal. sometimes met with sanctions or ostracism. That rigidity mirrors certain personality disorders, where the self is embedded within a rigid structure that cannot adapt without feeling endangered. Another angle is the concept of shared delusion, or folie à deux, where two or more people share a psychotic belief. Entire religious cultures may effectively form a vast folie à multitudes, millions agreeing on narratives of heaven, hell, sin, and salvation that have no empirical basis. Yet when the whole community takes the same stance, it becomes normal by definition. Psychology calls this social proof. We see it in marketing, politics, and fashion. But when ideas are unfalsifiable, immune to any test, social proof turns into collective blind faith. Still, calling religion a mental illness is more provocative than precise. Mental health professionals distinguish between culturally sanctioned beliefs and pathological ones. If you suddenly claimed your toothpaste was secretly a government surveillance device, you might be considered delusional. But if you claimed your ancestor from 2,000 years ago ascended bodily into heaven, it's religious doctrine. Psychiatry deliberately avoids labeling religious beliefs as disorders to respect cultural diversity and avoid stigma. That makes sense from a clinical standpoint, but it also shields faith from scrutiny. When belief is held to a lower standard of evidence, it effectively gains immunity from critical evaluation. In modern psychology, there's growing interest in undermining belief therapies, helping people question harmful ideas. Cognitive behavioral therapy aims to dismantle irrational beliefs that cause anxiety. Could similar techniques help people outgrow harmful religious thinking? Some deconversion counselors do precisely that, guiding former believers through emotional fallout and helping them rebuild a worldview grounded in evidence and self-determination. Their work suggests that, for many, intense faith can feel like an addiction. Withdrawal brings anxiety, restoration brings relief. Sobriety, in this analogy, is living without supernatural crutches. In the end, religion occupies a unique space between communal ritual, personal comfort, and unquestionable doctrine. It offers emotional relief and social support, yet also fosters rigidity and, in extreme cases, harm. Many religious experiences feel transcendent and uplifting, but when belief refuses to yield even to the plainest facts, it crosses a line into the realm of untestable conviction, a hallmark of mental illness. Whether you call it a disorder or an evolutionary adaptation, the parallels between extreme faith and certain clinical conditions are hard to ignore. Understanding those parallels could help societies promote healthier forms of belief, ones that embrace doubt, encourage questioning, and remain open to evidence rather than masquerading as unassailable truth.